and Aaron. Ryan Hanavan is currently acting as the Remote Sensing Program Manager for the United States Forest Service Forest Health Applications and Applied Sciences team, working directly with all forest health protection field offices on incorporating remote sensing into the detection monitoring workflow. Ryan has an associate and applied science degree in forest technology from State University of New York Environmental Science and Forestry Ranger School, a bachelor's of science and resource conservation from the University of Montana, a master's in forest entomology from SUNY ESF previously mentioned, and a PhD in entomology from the University of Idaho. Aaron Kamoske is a remote sensing specialist at the United States Forest Service Geospatial Technology and Application Center, which provides geospatial and remote sensing support to all U.S. Forest Service regions. Aaron has a Bachelor of Science in Resource Conservation from the University of Montana, as well as a PhD in Geography, Environment, and Spatial Sciences, and a graduate certificate in Spatial Ecology from Michigan State University. Welcome, Ryan and Aaron. We are very honored to have you here today. The virtual floor is all yours.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get this talk loaded. Are you able to see that title slide now?
Yeah, can you share the other screen, Ryan? That's the presenter view with all the notes and everything.
How's that?
Perfect.
Great. All right. Okay, so thank you again for having us here. We're pretty excited, just hearing kind of the conversation or in the introduction about capacity and looking at new technologies and trying to sort of navigate as we went through the pandemic, and looked at our detection monitoring program on the U.S. Forest Service side of things. A lot of similarities here, so we're excited to share this story with you all. So first off, just to give a big shout out at, we're very fortunate to have a lot of key people in place, and how this whole effort shaped up. And Aaron has a list of other folks on here. I would put Aaron's name on here in big bold and highlighted letters as well. We've been very fortunate to get the support from this crew, Abby, Lila, Jamie, Rowan, Marie, especially. So thank you, and a big shout out to them. So the Forest Health Monitoring Program is a national program designed to determine the status, changes, and trends and indicators of forest conditions on an annual basis. Primarily aerial detection surveys have been the key to bringing in spatial information on forest health events. Nationally standardized aerial and ground surveys to evaluate these changes in forest ecosystems. I have an image here of a rapid red pine mortality event that was going on up in northern Maine, or coastal Maine, Acadia National Park. Southern pine beetle mortality in Long Island. This is just a couple of images to share, and a conversation that we've had at length and over and over and over. There's a lot of trees out there, and we are trying on an annual basis to fly at approximately 1,000 feet above ground at about 100 miles per hour. And it's just there's a lot of trees out, hard to map everything. So we're always looking at ways to improve our detection monitoring program. We kind of got forced to do that rapidly when 2020 hit. GTAC, Geospatial Technology and Application Center, is a national center that provides leadership on cutting-edge geospatial and remote sensing implementation within the U.S. Forest Service. There's a long-standing relationship with forest health protection. More than 20 years, GTAC has partnered with FHP to investigate remote sensing technologies, build geospatial capacity, provide operational support to assess forest conditions. It's been a great relationship. I've been fortunate to participate in a lot of their trainings that they offer. We've had a lot of good collaboration over the years. This example is one of the ones that really stands out. 2020 was a different year. As we started this conversation, we were talking about phone booths in our offices and ways of going back to work potentially, and how we're going to navigate with the new video conferencing that we're using right now. But really, the start of it was this the pandemic, when COVID hit in approximately March 2020, is when we all went home and have been on a permanent telework ever since. I want to point out an important piece, the Farm Bill, the 2014 Farm Bill, and it's been amended over time, but it has very specific language in there on remote sensing, improving the use of remote sensing with the Forest Service and collaborating with other agencies like the Natural Resources Conservation Service, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and United States Geological Survey to integrate remote sensing, spatial analysis techniques, and other new technologies. So there has been a push since about 2014 to really boost these efforts. In 2020, when COVID hit, really forced us to look at this and find ways to improve our detection monitoring program, or even just to keep our detection monitoring program going. Silver lining. There hopefully always is a silver lining, and we were able to pull together a team, and we worked very closely between GTAC and FHP to develop some remote sensing workflows to look at how we were going to be collecting spatial information across the landscape on forest health pest events. So I'm going to put some acronyms up here, and I'll try and make sure that I spell them all out for the folks that don't know them. R1, R4, that would stand for Region 1 and Region 4 in the Forest Service, the equivalent of the state of Montana, Idaho, Utah, and Nevada, where my service area is. We ran a parallel supplemental remote sensing effort with our aerial survey program, and collaborated with the Rocky Mountain Research Team to use Landsat data to look at bark beetle mortality and defoliation across across this area. Capacity building was something that came up in the introduction here. It's something that we focused on pretty heavily. We worked very closely with GTAC, and GTAC actually hosted several key remote sensing training programs to help us build that capacity and get our staff up to a point where we can do some of these exercises and get through these workflows. So assessment and detection, continued monitoring, mapping, and attribution, remote sensing platforms. It's been something that we've been trying to refine, improve, and develop over several years. We worked very closely with Aaron on this exercise as well, as the GTAC group brought in their products at a higher spatial resolution, and we were able to do some comparisons and some validations and look at how these different algorithms were performing and how we were able to map these events over the landscape. This is just a quick look at that area I was talking about: Montana, Idaho, Nevada, and Utah. The area on the left shows what was surveyed in yellow in 2019 with aerial detection, so visual surveys. That sort of orangish color was surveyed in 2020 only, outside of anything that was surveyed in 2019. And then the green is a duplicative areas where they were surveyed in both 2019 and 2020. The reason we point that out, is just to kind of go back to that first slide on forest health monitoring, where we're looking at trends and changes over time. So to do any kind of trend analysis, we have to have some repeated measures over these same points in time. So the area in gray is just area that was not surveyed at all in Region 1, Region 4. So there's quite a bit of area that didn't get flown. Definitely a lot of area that wasn't flown in 2020 that was flown in 2019. So we really had to look at how we were going to map any kind of events over the space of time. The slide on the right, or the image on the right, shows 1 degree tiles. These are the equivalent of Landsat scenes to bring in our efforts and map every forested pixel across Region 1. So that was the remote sensing effort that was running in parallel to our aerial survey program. And this highlight here, it looks like most of it made it in. It looks like maybe we got a little bit cut off, but that's okay. This here is a snapshot to look a little bit closer at the state of Nevada and this is the Ruby Mountain Range. We were able to work, Aaron, myself, and his team closely with Gene Phillips, who is the state of Nevada forest health specialist, to look at some of the area that they had flown in 2019 and prior to that, and then compare it with some of these remote sensing outputs in 2020. And Gene was able to work through with us and do some visual validations, got out into the field. He got out into the field a little bit. We did everything via Teams calls and video conferencing, but was able to validate white bark pine mortality from mountain pine beetle. There was a defoliation event going on in the aspen as well. So we were able to do quite a bit of validation in these efforts, which was great. It was an opportunity to really boost this program and get some good on the ground information. Excuse me. As we moved kind of from 2020 to the planning stages of 2021, there was a lot of conversation about what next, kind of shifting away from the concept of triage. We were just trying to look and support where we could to some next steps. And the next steps was the kind of the logical standing up of our Forest Health Remote Sensing Technical Working Group. And towards the end of this presentation, we'll be able to do a little drive-through just to show the hub site and give some examples. I mentioned Aaron's Delta Viewer team. We have this hub site for Delta Viewer change detection products. This bottom right shows the Region 1, Region 4 tab, which allows us to go in and look at all the products that we've created through Region 1, Region 4 with the Delta Viewer team. TA office hours, very similar to this session that we're presenting in right now. We stood up something called the Technical Assistance Office Hours, the TA office hours, kind of simulating a grad school seminar experience, where at first we brought in different specialists to go over some problem solving. We were all trying to go through anything from some classical, just looking at some imagery, to developing TBKs, to doing some scan and sketch, to doing some change detection and beyond. So just sort of a problem solving session that has since evolved into what we can now call the lunch and learn session as part of the Remote Sensing Technical Working Group. So we do a monthly lunch and learn call that's no longer really focusing on technical stuff and more of highlighting some actual on the ground remote sensing projects and efforts that are ongoing around the country. And then over the left, just kind of a shift in the way we use tools and again, kind of going back to the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about Skype being a verb and how we messaged back before the pandemic. Now, we have used our tablets and sketch mapping tools to get up in planes and do our aerial surveys, but we've really found the suite of Esri products and the hub sites, the dashboards, the Survey 123, field maps, and just even Experience Builder. With working with this suite of Esri products, we've been able to really do quite a bit of work in the realm of creating geospatial information and reporting on it. So it's been pretty cool. And with that, I'm going to hand off now to Aaron.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So one big thing that we've been really trying to spend a lot of time on is, COVID hit, it was 2020. We were doing a lot of these things kind of on the fly, and we really wanted to start to figure out how we can operationalize these things and really start to take remote sensing and geospatial technologies and tie it into the existing monitoring plans. So one thing we've really been doing is focusing on areas that aren't really flown by ADS or aerial surveys on a regular basis. So we've been trying to break that up into watershed scales, which you can see on this map right here, which shows the number of forested acres that are not flown currently that we can try to prioritize. So whenever we're able to look at this across the United States, this lets us examine things at a scale that we can ingest into modeling frameworks, ordering of imagery, instead of being like, how do we go in and cover Western Montana? We can focus in on very, very specific parts of that and make it more manageable. Next slide, Ryan. So as part of those efforts for planning, we really need to go in and start examining all the different change detection products that are operationally ready in the Forest Service to us. We found that most of these are producing very, very similar results, but there's large trade-offs in terms of delivery time, if they're an annual product, what year is the change showing up? A lot of the annual ones are late August, and we might want to look at something in May. So we were able to go in and develop a couple of tools such as Delta Viewer that lets us basically do some really simple 2-date change detection for anywhere we want in the whole world on any day, since we get sentinel imagery every 5 days. So we can kind of try to fill these gaps in for rapid assessment and monitoring. This is part of a report we put together that can be found on the RSTWG hub site that we'll show a little bit further on as well. Next slide. So one of the projects that kind of brought all these different things together, aerial survey, remote sensing, ground data, pre-season planning, all these different things, was this case study that we did for mapping drought-related stress and mortality in pinyon juniper ecosystems. It came to our attention really early on in 2021 that there was this widespread concern about juniper drought. BLM, Bureau of Land Management, was really concerned about it from a fire safety perspective. Forest Health was really concerned about it from a forest health perspective. But if you look at the extended juniper, it's basically the entire Western United States, and it's not an area that's normally flown for survey. So we were able to meet as a team of remote sensing specialists, entomologists, pathologists, aerial surveyors, fire, and kind of devise a strategy that we could use tools like Delta Viewer to be able to come up with smaller spatial extents to really focus some existing efforts on, such as field validation, other methodologies, high resolution imagery. Next slide, Ryan. So we ran these products across the whole entire Western United States for the juniper extent, and we were really able to zoom in and see that the southwestern US of Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, and Utah had a really big problem. There's a lot of changes showing up across the landscape. And so we were able to take this area and really distill it down to the blue polygons that you see on the screen of areas where we could go order high resolution imagery. We could send field crews, do a little bit of aerial survey, which was really critical to us being able to get a better handle on what was going on currently so we could plan for the 2022 season. Next slide, Ryan. And there's also a lot of interest within this community about science and what, not just where these kinds of disturbances and declines are going, but why are they being caused? There's been a lot of talk about climate change and things like how does a rapidly warming climate affect pinyon juniper ecosystems in the long and short term? And what's the baseline that we compare these changes to? So this really led to these important questions. Next slide. And we have this map here that was produced by Joel Egan. He's the acting forest health monitoring director. And it shows extreme dry conditions from 2000 to 2020, with purple color showing areas that were in extremely dry conditions for at least 65% of the months from 2000 to 2022. So this really kind of shows us that a lot of these areas that we're seeing this rapid pinyon juniper decline happening are also the areas that are the hottest and driest as things have been changing across the landscape. And this really leads to a lot of interesting questions that a lot of funding proposals have been put in for right now. Next slide, Ryan. So the things that we really want to start asking is, we know that there's an increased demand for this baseline data as the West becomes hotter and drier. We know that remote sensing can be really difficult in these ecosystems due to soil exposure, slight changes in moisture content, but it really serves as the best option right now due to this remote terrain. This is a really great opportunity for us to link remote sensing products with climate data and field data to examine these multi-decadal trends so we can get a better handle on how do we manage these things for a variety of different purposes. We currently have an ongoing field campaign to help examine and explain mapping successes and areas for improvement so we can start to use more advanced methodologies, which we'll get to in a second. Next slide, Ryan. So there's several funding proposals we're working with NASA to develop, and there's a couple different evaluation monitoring proposals in, as well as some National Science Foundation proposals to really start to use this type of data to examine these long-term drivers. And once again, we have some more information on the hub site. And then next slide, Ryan. So this kind of efforts that we found really wanted us to lead to getting some more advanced methodologies. And one of those is that we really wanted to get away from using pixels. They're really hard to deal with. You wind up with a raster image. You can't refine it as easily. So we kind of put together this clustering custom cartographic algorithm in R so we could convert all of our pixels to polygons. That allows people to be able to take that information out into the field. We can attribute it with species information. We can put all the different things we need for reporting. And the best part about it is that if there's a thing that's wrong in the remote sensing data, we can just delete it because we're trying to do operational readiness. So it allows us to kind of pick and choose the data that we want to report on based off of what's correct. And that wasn't really possible before. And that was one of our big findings from this Juniper work, is getting us to that stage so we could use this stuff more operationally. Next slide. And another thing this led to is really the need for more defined methodologies. So one thing that we've been looking at is machine learning in ponderosa pine in Arizona and New Mexico, as well as pinyon juniper. And the thing that we really want to be able to do is be able to describe mortality stages. So not just say that some type of change happened in this location, but we don't know what it is, but being able to say, you know, this is a first year fader, it's a yellow tree, it's a dead tree, it's a green tree, etc. So we've been really working with a lot of folks down in Arizona and New Mexico to help reduce the amount of aerial survey time over some of these heterogeneous forests in the southwestern United States, such as ponderosa pine. So we've been using Sentinel-2 imagery for modeling and high resolution worldview imagery, so sub-meter for training data, as you can see in this image on the right, where you can see red trees, dead trees, and green trees across the landscape. Next slide. So using various machine learning algorithms to upscale this training data, we can produce maps that show mortality stages to help supplement aerial surveys. And so these are some of the initial results to the right, where we can see that we can pull up percentage of green canopy, we can pull up red trees, yellow trees, etc. So this work's just begun. We just started kicking it off a couple of weeks ago. We're already starting to see some pretty nice looking results that are promising for the future. Next slide. We've been doing a similar kind of experiment with LiDAR data up in the greater Yellowstone area. It's an area that's not normally flown with aerial survey. Partly it's remote, partly it overlaps with a handful of different regions. And it's had some large outbreaks of defoliators and bark beetles in the last couple of years. So there's been this really big push to help inform updating bark beetle risk models for the region that we're trying to use remote sensing to help determine that. Next slide. So once again, we're using a lot of different machine learning algorithms, things like random forest and neural networks, to try to upscale some of this training data that Ryan went and sat down and collected about 1,000 points with centimeter aerial photography imagery across the landscape. We're also using some LiDAR derived canopy structural data and environmental variables in this project. And so once again, this work also has just begun, and we're starting to see some promising results without any model refinement or training data. Just collect it and go click the button. You can see some of the accuracy results below. And we're really hoping that this can kind of help us push the envelope a little bit in terms of being able to differentiate defoliation, mortality stages, and green trees across the landscape that doesn't really get surveyed on a very regular basis. So right now, this is all research and pretty experimental, and we're hoping that our results will be good enough that we'll be able to operationalize some of this work and use it as kind of a plug and play methodology for other regions that change detection might not be the easiest. Thinking about places like the southeastern United States that has a lot of managed timber forest kinds of systems out there. And I think I'll hand it back to you now, Ryan.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, so just to kind of continue and share some other examples, some of the other sort of efforts that have been ongoing as a part of all of this, looking at whether or not we could better map diseases. One of the things that we have identified in terms of our aerial survey program and just detection monitoring as a whole is that most of our disease information either comes in from ground information or other methods. So we wanted to look at some data fusion methods where we brought LiDAR together with either high resolution imagery, multi-spec or hyperspectral imagery as well. This particular slide shows a project that happened across the Southwest in Region 3, which would be New Mexico. And then up in region 6, which would be Oregon, where we were looking at some root disease with some airborne LiDAR, terrestrial ground collected LiDAR, and then aerial ortho imagery. With that, we have a paper that was officially accepted yesterday in Forest Ecology and Management. That should be out in the next month or so, where we were able to predict root disease centers using these remote sensing techniques, which is it's promising because having conversations with Aaron and his group, I think we're confident that we could be able to take this to our NAPE imagery, which is about a half meter or less 4-band imagery that's collected across the United States on sort of a 2 to 3 year cycle per state. So it could help us to then have a greater root disease mapping program if we can get this upscaled. Some other ongoing efforts as well, looking at these UAS image collects and being able to map bark beetle episodes using some vegetation indices. This is the sensor that was on this UAS is a head wall sensor that's similar to what is mounted on the NASA G-Light, the Goddard's LiDAR and hyperspectral and thermal imager. So this is a multispectral head wall sensor that can pick up some of these different vegetation indices, NDVI, NDRE. There's a true color picture on the top right too, just to kind of give you that the distinction. Going back to the image that Aaron shared, where we're looking at bark beetles, you can see here we have a couple different colors of phases or stages of mortality. So trying to pull that out with this model. And then another big effort that is bringing more remote sensing into our inventory program, forest inventory and analysis, FIA. Alaska is a very rural and hard to access area. So forest inventory and analysis has been working with NASA Goddard to fly the G-Light sensor, the Goddard's LiDAR hyperspectral and thermal imaging system to pull some flight lines together and fuse remote sensing techniques with their inventory program. So there's some inventory data coming together there that's remote sensing based. And then with that, I think we just wanted to move into this demo here with the Remote Sensing Technical Working Group hub site and just kind of share what we have available through this link.
Right, if it doesn't work for some reason, I can always share my screen too.
I have to just remember which iteration of password I used. There we go. All right, so this is the Remote Sensing Technical Working Group hub site. You would need a
right, I'm just seeing the PowerPoint right now.
Oh. So let me see here. All right, how's that?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so this is the Remote Sensing Technical Working Group hub site. To access it, you would need a ArcGIS Online username and password. You can use, I think I did 3 attempts there, 4 attempts on my password before I got locked out there. So I was able to get in there, but that's the only limitation to this this hub site is that you do need the ArcGIS Online credentials. And then just to give you some demos, we have this, all of the information there about the technical working group. our charter document, steering committee membership who participates on that. Annual meetings. We do have a remote sensing technical working group meeting coming up on March 8th and 9th. And anyone interested in attending can reach out to Aaron or myself, and we'll get you in a Teams link and invitation to that meeting. Tutorials and resources. I was talking about you know, a lot of the information that was collected over the years and since 2020 and put into tutorial format, kind of walking through. Here's the first one here, front and center, the high resolution imagery acquisition and processing. We're dealing with a lot of the NAPE imagery that we were just talking about, National Agricultural Imaging, National Agriculture
Imaging program?
Correct, yeah. So basically, yeah, you know, pulling together this sub-meter 4-band imagery, working with state partners and other partners to do some scan and sketch and other looks at it. I'm working with North Dakota and Montana right now to look at the potential spread of emerald ash borer with some of this NAPE imagery. So useful for a number of different things. Data sources, getting into the Sentinel Hub EO browser, USGS Earth Explorer, Google Earth Engine, looking at some Landsat composites. So quite a bit of stuff to access here. Current projects that we were just talking about, you can go in and access those. All of the TA office hours that we work through, those are recorded and stored here. We have the STORM team is an acronym that we put together for kind of the beginning phases of this, but all of the meetings that we had and notes and other information that came out of that is up there as well. Aaron, is there anything else do you want me to go into anything here?
I think that seems good. There's lots of trainings. We have a lot of training resources there, code samples, project reports. It's a pretty nice little resource to serve as a one-stop shop for everything you kind of need to do remote sensing right now.
Yeah. Change detection products guide, our supplement paper from Journal of Forestry. So, and I think with that, thank you, and we'll probably open it up for questions.
Thanks, Ryan and Aaron. One-stop shopping, I think, is pretty much what describes it. That's awesome. So we're going to start our question period. So a brief reminder to use the raise hand function in the reactions icon in the Zoom screen if you have a question, and don't forget to unmute your mic in order to ask a question, or you can type it in chat if you have any questions. So the floor is now open to any questions for Ryan or Aaron.
Hi.
Ryan, I don't see hands on mine here.
I don't see any hand up right now.
You have a question?
Sure.
Anybody hearing me? Living in Quebec, Canada. I'm wondering if there's some data available covering, I mean, the Canada, but also our region north, up north.
So looking for
on your website, the data you're showing there. Is there some analysis, not analysis, but data already prepared over the Canada region?
so
Or is it only US?
Yeah, right now the effort has been exclusively for U.S. Forest Service area or the continental United States and parts of Alaska.
Okay, and the Delta viewer, is it only for the US also?
So yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, Delta Viewer is just it's a simple little Google Earth engine tool we put together that uses Sentinel or Landsat imagery and simple 2-day change detection. So basically it takes a before and an after image, calculates a bunch of different indices, and then gives you some areas to kind of go investigate further. We've just used that internally to the Forest Service right now, but we've worked a little bit with the Mexican Forest Service, as well as some international programs partners as well. It can be ran anywhere where there's imagery at the end of the day.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
I've got a question, and I think it's probably just very similar to the question you just answered, and it's with regards to the icon you have within the hub that refers to data, and then you have all of the imagery sources listed. I'm assuming that when you click on those links, it's just taking you to imagery that's available for the US, or is it taking you to the hub for that particular imagery type?
Yeah, so the links there take you to the source for where all of the imagery would be available. The tools point you to some information on how they were developed, how they're used, and then the outputs are usually generated from meeting with groups to identify areas of interest to then use those tools.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Aaron and Ryan? And I think Aaron or Ryan, you mentioned that if somebody wanted to attend the meeting on March 9th, or I think when we had just talked about a month ago, you also were interested in inviting Canadians to participate in the working group if they chose to.
Correct, and I just put my email in the chat. If anyone wants an invitation to that meeting, I'm happy to send it to you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions here. No other questions for Ryan or Aaron? Nothing in the chat.
Seeing any
Well, thank you both for your presentation today. Certainly, as I said, one-stop shopping, that's awesome, particularly for people who are looking for resources. You know, no more of that endless Google searching. We can just go to your website and your hub. Now, people have to sign up for that and have to have an ArcGIS, a private or government ArcGIS online account. So again, thank you very much. And Ryan's email is up there if anybody wants to contact Ryan to join that meeting on March 9th or get access to the hub. And thank you both for presentation today, and thank you all for attending this presentation today. I want to remind you about a presentation next week with Dr. Andrew Reinman from the